Picture this. You're standing in a dark, incredibly cavernous temple. The air around you is thick. I mean, it is just heavy, with the smell of incense and this unspoken, suffocating weight of what is about to happen.
Oh yeah, that oppressive atmosphere is palpable right from the jump.
Right beside the main altar, there's a guard. He's standing motionless like carved stone. Both of his hands are wrapped so tightly around the hilt of a broadsword that his knuckles are completely drained of color. He's just waiting for the word to strike. And somewhere below you, down in the darkness of an underground cellar, is a young girl. And she is the chosen sacrifice.
It is such an evocative, incredibly cinematic opening. The author places you right in the middle of that dark room before completely pulling the rug out from under you.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm so ready to get into this one.
And I'm your expert for today. Honestly, I've been looking forward to breaking this narrative down all week.
We have a truly fascinating piece of source material in front of us today. We're looking at a pivotal chapter from the narrative Chasing Death, specifically episode 19, which is titled The Forgiven. For those of you who follow the lore, you know this is a massive turning point.
It really is the fulcrum of the entire story. Everything pivots right here.
Our mission for this deep dive is to sort of look under the hood of this specific chapter. We're taking a story that seamlessly blends high-stakes political treason, a grueling chase across a desert wasteland, and a jaw-dropping supernatural climax involving a 1,000-year-old ghost.
Which sounds like a lot when you list it out.
It does. But we're going to break down how it all works. We know you're familiar with the basic plot, so we aren't just going to recount what happens step by step. We want to explore the mechanics of the world building, the heavy themes of ancient guilt, and the truly bizarre tactical choices the characters make when their backs are literally against the wall.
Because while the action is undeniably pulse-pounding, the text is actually doing some very heavy lifting underneath. It uses the framework of a thriller to ask some deep questions about the nature of divine intervention and the reality-altering power of forgiveness.
So let's start by unpacking that inciting incident. We are back in that heavy, incense-filled temple. The priests send a delegation down the torchlit corridors to fetch the high priest for the ritual. When they push his heavy wooden door open, they find him dead. His ceremonial vestments are just soaked through with blood.
Total pandemonium breaks out.
Exactly. And they quickly discover the young girl meant for the sacrifices vanish. Now, for the Kingdom of Elam, this isn't just a high-profile assassination, is it?
Not at all. To understand why, we really have to look at the geopolitical and religious context of Elam within this world. In a heavily polytheistic society where cosmic order is maintained entirely through ritual, including human sacrifice, an event like this is an existential threat.
Right. When the news hits King Hannibal, his advisors are terrified. They warn that a curse will fall upon the entire kingdom if the girl isn't returned to the altar.
And that brings up a really critical question about the king's actual motivation. When he discovers that his own minister of the court, Zayn, orchestrated the murder and the rescue, Hannibal just flies into this cold fury. But you have to ask, is this reaction really about appeasing the gods? Or is it about his own shattered ego?
That is the fascinating ambiguity the author plays with here. Hannibal frames it as a desecration of the divine order, a sin that admits no forgiveness. But his subsequent actions feel deeply, deeply personal.
Oh, absolutely. He dispatches an elite cavalry unit with absolute orders to run the fugitives down before dawn.
And the punishment he devises for Zayn isn't just a quick execution to satisfy the gods. He plans to seal Zayn in a lightless dungeon beneath the earth for the rest of his natural life.
Which speaks to a profound vindictiveness. He wants Zayn to suffer in sensory deprivation for decades. It sets a terrifying ticking clock for the rest of the narrative.
Which brings us to the escape itself. We shift scenes from that claustrophobic city out into the brutal openness of the desert wasteland. Zayn is leading the farmer and his young daughter through enormous dunes and shifting sand. The physical toll on the girl is immediate.
And the father begs Zayn to just stop for a few minutes so the child can breathe.
I have to admit, reading Zayn's reaction to the father asking for a break felt incredibly harsh. Zayn doesn't yell, but his answer is absolute. He basically says, don't even think about it.
Yeah, he says, do you want your daughter back on that altar before nightfall? If that is what you want, then sit down and rest.
It feels almost cruel given what the little girl has just been through.
It feels harsh if you're reading a modern drama, sure, but in a survival thriller, it is a necessary tactical reality. Zayn is delivering a brutal reality check. He is forcing the father to recognize the zero margin for error nature of their situation. The king's soldiers are already behind them. Every minute they stand still, that gap closes.
It's a sobering moment.
Yeah.
And it works. The farmer goes pale, realizes the truth, and agrees to keep moving. But by the afternoon, their Arabian horses are failing. The animals are completely spent, laboring through the soft sand.
They're forced into a brief halt in the shadow of a dune just to keep the horses from dying under them.
And that is when the girl points to the horizon and asks, "What is that?"
The math of the chase has finally caught up to them. They see a massive, boiling, brown column of dust climbing into the sky.
The visual of the army approaching is pure nightmare fuel. They throw their cloaks over the horses and ride back out into the open desert. But when they crest the next dune, the sun catches the tips of the soldiers' spears. It's this long, glittering line of light advancing right across the sand toward them.
And they're in the open desert. There is no cover, no tricks of the terrain to hide behind.
The farmer completely breaks down. He's weeping, convinced they are going to be slaughtered without a second thought.
Which sets the stage for one of the most unexpected pivots in the entire story. Zayn's response to this inescapable physical threat is entirely unorthodox.
He commands them to dismount and get behind the dune. And then he just kneels in the sand, bows his head, closes his eyes, and begins to pray.
Right. So they're trapped against the dunes, the king's cavalry is practically breathing down their necks, and the farmer is having a complete breakdown. If you're reading this as a standard military thriller, you expect Zayn to pull out some tactical trick here.
But he doesn't. He abandons the physical world entirely. It feels almost reckless, doesn't it? He just went through this massive, bloody prison break to save this girl, and now he's just kneeling in the sand with arrows flying at them.
Structurally, it is a brilliant subversion by the author. We spent this whole chapter focused on the physical elements, the heat, the exhaustion of the Arabian horses, the iron breastplates of the soldiers, and right at the climax, the narrative shifts entirely to the spiritual plane.
For listeners who might be focusing heavily on the lore here, let's pause and unpack exactly what he is trying to tap into. Because he's not praying to the gods of Elam. He speaks to a voice that answers him from thin air. And he calls her the spirit of Vanya.
And here is the massive lore drop.
Yeah, Vanya betrayed Zayn 1,000 years ago.
That is the crucial pivot. Fans of the broader lore know that Vanya's relationship with Zayn goes back a millennium. The weight of that ancient betrayal has trapped her soul in a restless, tormented wandering for all those centuries. She has been searching for this exact moment to finally make it right.
Wait, let's dissect that 1,000-year timeline for a second. If Vanya betrayed Zayn 1,000 years ago, that implies Zayn is immortal, or at least centuries old himself. Does the text give us any clue as to how he has survived this long, operating as a minister in King Hannibal's court?
The text leaves the mechanics of his longevity somewhat ambiguous, but it heavily implies that Zayn's existence is tied to a higher divine purpose. He is a man out of time, carrying the weight of ancient history while navigating the petty, brutal politics of mortal kings.
This makes his plea to Vanya even more profound. He isn't just asking a ghost for a favor. He is confronting a millennium of personal baggage while a mortal army bears down on him.
Which makes his choice even more insane from a tactical perspective. He is outsourcing the survival of this innocent girl to a spirit who literally stabbed him in the back a millennia ago. You have to ask, why her? Why now?
Because the physical threat has escalated beyond mortal solutions. The army has closed into firing range. The commander orders a ranging shot, and a volley of arrows punches into the sand not 50 yards from where they are hiding. Zayn knows that iron and muscle cannot save them now. Only a supernatural intervention can bridge the gap.
He tells Vanya to be a wall they cannot cross.
The juxtaposition is incredible. You have this immediate, visceral, physical threat colliding with an ancient, deeply personal spiritual crisis. And the farmer and his daughter can't hear any of this. To them, Zayn is just kneeling in the sand, talking to empty air while an army prepares to annihilate them.
And Vanya's response is the emotional pivot of the entire narrative. She could just unleash her power and wipe out the army, but she doesn't. The magic system here isn't just transactional, it is deeply tied to spiritual resolution. She pauses and asks for the one thing she has been denied for 1,000 years.
She says, "Will you truly forgive me, Zayn?"
So think about the mechanics of what is happening here. Zayn has literally seconds before the next volley of arrows hits them. He replies, "Yes, I forgive you, but hurry, they are almost upon us."
And Vanya simply says, "Watch, Zayn," and her presence is gone. Just as she disappears, the second volley of arrows arrives, burying themselves in the sand mere inches from the family.
The pacing in this section is masterful. The tension is at its absolute peak. The farmer completely loses it. He's ready to make a blind run into the open desert. Zayn has to physically drag him back down into the sand.
And the army's commander brings his horse to the crest of the dune, roaring a final warning that he will cut them down where they stand.
That is when the world cracks open.
The cataclysm that follows is breathtaking. But what I find fascinating is how specific the author is with the destruction. It isn't just a generic explosion. A bolt of lightning splits the sky, but there are no clouds. The sky is completely clear, blue, and merciless.
The lightning strikes with a sound like the earth breaking along a fault line, and the ground violently shudders.
Then a second bolt strikes, and the earth's trembling deepens into a violent convulsion. The ground between Zayn and the army simply gives way. It collapses inward to create a vast, dark chasm that stretches across the desert floor.
It creates a sudden, impassable physical divide. The soldiers are forced to pull their horses back from the crumbling edge.
But let's analyze the commander's reaction here. He is staring into a void that didn't exist a second ago, created by lightning from a clear sky. Yet his hubris is staggering. He screams that it is a conjurer's trick and orders his men to loose their spears.
Why does he deny what is blatantly a supernatural event? Because accepting it shatters his entire worldview. This commander operates on the belief that King Hannibal's authority, and by extension the authority of Elam's polytheistic gods, is absolute. Acknowledging that Zayn wields access to a power capable of restructuring the earth means admitting that his king, his gods, and his entire mission are fundamentally flawed.
It is the ultimate act of psychological denial. He chooses to unleash a dark, lethal cloud of spears and arrows rather than face the truth.
But that cloud of weapons never arrives. A third bolt of lightning descends, and this one strikes the army directly.
The text describes it as a total, white, absolute flash. When the light passes, half of the soldiers and their horses are just gone, reduced instantly to drifting columns of ash.
The sheer scale of the destruction is biblical. It moves beyond a mere physical defense and becomes a statement of absolute divine supremacy.
The surviving soldiers finally break and try to run, but a fourth deafening bolt finds them. When the ringing silence returns, there are no soldiers, no horses, no weapons, just blackened traces on the ground.
It is a terrifying display of power.
But what strikes me is how quickly the narrative steers us back to the emotional core. The spirit's voice returns, softer now, and asks Zayn once more if he truly forgives her.
This is the critical moment of synthesis for the chapter. Zayn's initial yes was hurried, spoken under the immediate threat of arrows. But now, in the profound silence of the aftermath, he must confirm it without the pressure of imminent death. He tells her, "I forgive you. From the bottom of my heart, believe that."
And that absolute, unconditional forgiveness is what finally releases her. Vanya lets out a joyous laugh that rolls across the desert like distant thunder before dissolving into a complete, restful silence. Her 1,000 years of torment are over.
It is a brilliant way to resolve the ancient lore while simultaneously saving the mortal characters. But we also have to consider the impact this has on the bystanders. The poor farmer and his daughter have watched the literal annihilation of a royal army, followed by the subtle, profound peace.
They sink to their knees right at Zayn's feet, reaching for him in worship.
Which makes total sense given the culture they come from. In Elam, power equals divinity. If a man can summon lightning to erase an army, he must be a god.
But Zayn immediately shuts that down. He pulls them to their feet and tells them prostration is not for men, nor for idols. Worship belongs only to the one true God. Now, just to be clear for you listening, we are simply reporting on the theological elements presented in the source text here, not taking a stance on the religious arguments the author is making.
Absolutely. But within the context of the story, this is a massive theological shift. Zayn is actively dismantling the polytheistic, idol-worshipping structure of Elam in real time. He credits the power and mercy of this one true God for their salvation.
It clearly leaves a mark on the farmer. With tears wet on his face, he looks at Zayn and makes a declaration. He says, "I believe in your one true God."
With their pursuers erased, the three travelers mount their horses and ride toward the Nubian frontier. Let's talk about Nubia for a second. Why is that specific border mentioned as their safe haven?
Nubia, historically and within the context of many ancient narratives, represents a space outside the immediate geopolitical grasp of empires like Elam or Egypt. It serves as a physical manifestation of their newfound freedom, a place where the oppressive religious and political laws of King Hannibal no longer apply.
Crossing that frontier isn't just about escaping an army, it's about stepping into a new paradigm of existence.
It is a remarkable synthesis of genres. What begins as a gritty, fast-paced political thriller seamlessly evolves into a deeply spiritual exploration of faith, divine power, and redemption. We've gone from a bloody assassination in a temple to an ancient ghost finding peace in the desert.
It demonstrates the author's ability to operate on multiple levels simultaneously. The physical stakes keep the plot moving at breakneck speed, while the spiritual and historical lore provide a rich philosophical foundation that rewards closer analysis.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought to leave you with long after this deep dive ends. Think about the core mechanic of what just happened. The physical salvation of that innocent little girl, saving her from a gruesome ritualistic sacrifice, was entirely, fundamentally dependent on one man's willingness to let go of a thousand-year-old grudge.
If Zayn doesn't genuinely forgive Vanya in that exact moment, the arrows hit their mark.
The miracle requires his active participation in forgiveness. It really makes you wonder, how often are the breakthroughs or the miracles we desperately need in our own lives locked securely behind our stubborn refusal to simply forgive the ghosts of our past?
That is a powerful framework for understanding not just the story, but the human condition itself. We often look for external solutions when the true barrier is internal.
A perfect place to wrap up our analysis. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the sands of Elam and the complexities of ancient lore. Keep questioning the text, and until next time, keep diving deep.